Hi, I'm Ben Saunders. I'm a queer transmasc artist based here in Manchester. And yeah, thank you for coming to this workshop. This is part of the Pride kind of special of workshops. So there's kind of a range of things happening, but this one's going to be focusing on kind of queer ceramic making, using air dry clay. Sorry, my cat's come in. Hello. This is Crumpets. She is going to be part of this workshop. She always likes to come in when I'm in my studio, my office here, so she'll be pottering in and out because she likes to be the star of the attention. So I'm sure she'll be okay. I'm sure she'll be around. Yeah, you might hear her screaming from down on the floors because she doesn't have anywhere to sit in here, so she always wants to be involved. You going? Okay, she's going to go wander around. You might see her walk past as well. But yeah, thank you for coming to the workshop. This is the first one that I've done kind of online, like as a virtual one really, because I've been working as a ceramicist and illustrating kind of creative practitioner for kind of a number of years. I've kind of been doing it part-time while studying for about 4 years, and then doing it full-time for about a year and a bit. So yeah, it's kind of, time's flying by. But yeah, I've done loads of workshops with I do life drawing and delivering life drawing workshops, and other ones like creative workshops and things like that. I've done a couple of ceramic workshops as well that are kind of like making ceramic pieces to that are like food safe and kind of usable and things like that. And a few air dry clay ones as well, which is what this one's going to be. But yeah, this is the first virtual one that I've done, so this is going to take a bit of getting used to because I've got a little setup of like cameras and things like that. So yeah, but I'm going to be in the comments whilst you're all watching this, so if you have any questions or anything, I can also answer any questions. So it's not live, but I'm here, so if you need to ask questions you can, but this has been filmed in advance. But yeah, so all you kind of really need, it's really simple. I'll just get it up on the camera here as well. So all you need is a clean surface, clean work surface like here. If you have anything that's kind of easy to put things onto, so like I use a little wooden, you can get them in craft shops. They're kind of like little wooden plates, I guess, but they're just kind of, yeah, trying to like show it in both cameras. Yeah, they're just little wooden boards really, but you don't need one of them. But if you have one of them, they're quite handy, because then when you are kind of wanting to get your piece off the work surface at the end, it's a bit easier to kind of lift them off there than kind of trying to get it up off the table. But if you've just got the table, that's also completely fine. Another thing that works well is kind of a chopping board. So a chopping board that you're not really wanting to use anymore, or like kind of things like that. So yeah, really anything works. You also need a rolling pin. I've got a little plastic clear one here, which I use for my ceramics, but also if you have a like a wooden one for like food and stuff, that's also completely fine. And so I'm just moving the camera there so you can see everything. And then I have a pencil and a paintbrush. And I also put in the description as well, you can use like a lollipop stick or yeah, kind of anything like that really. And it's basically just something that has kind of a pointy edge, because they then resemble the like ceramic tools that I use, because you can get the ceramic tools as well, but they are just a little bit more kind of specialist. They're also a little hack that I use. I use stumbling on my words. I use cake decorating tools. And they're exactly the same. They're just these little kind of like pointy edge tools, and these little kind of plasticky ones as well. But yeah, so anything really works, but they all kind of have like little points. So the end of a pencil if you want a bigger point, or the kind of end of a paintbrush also works. This is the good thing about using like clay and using air dry clay, is that anything really works, because it's such like a malleable, tactile kind of medium. Like you don't need to have loads of resources to use it. Like you can just use your fingers. Like worst case, you can just use your fingernails. But yeah, so then the other thing you need is a little sponge and a little pot of water as well. This is actually a pot that I made and I use for my water because it's a little bit sharp on the edges, so I didn't want to give it to anyone because it's a little bit sharp and dangerous. So I use it as my water bomb. But yeah, so that's all you kind of really need. And what we're going to be making is something that resembles this. So this is a little wall hanging. As you can see, it's got a little hole in it, so you can hang it on like a nail on the wall. And this one isn't exactly what we're going to be making, because we're also going to be putting a little incense holder on it as well, so that it's just basically just like a little blob, really. That's not the technical term for it, but a little blob that's got a little hole in it, so you can have a little incense stick hanging off it. Or if you don't want to have incense, if you don't really like it, then you can also just have a little wall hanging, and you can put like rings on it, or have little trinkets, or you can just decorate it and have it as a little hanging shelf. But yeah, so you can either do one where it's got the shelf in the middle like this, or you can do it so the shelf's at the bottom as well. So it's really just kind of preference of what you want to do, really. But yeah, so that's what we're going to be making. And these are proper fired ceramic ones, and I'm going to be using ceramic clay today, but it is exactly the same as air dry clay in terms of how it's used. So the techniques that I'm doing, the process that I'm doing, it's literally identical. The only thing that's different is obviously when this one's dry, it then has to be fired, whereas the clay that you're using is just kind of air dry. So within like 48, 24 hours, it'll be completely dry. And then, hello, she's back. The cat is back. I'm not sure if I actually said her name, but her name is Crumpets. You're gonna have to entertain yourself, Crumpets. Sorry. That's because this is normally sofa admin time of the afternoon, so she wants to be sat on the sofa with me, I think. But yeah, so this is ceramic clay, but the only difference really is that air dry just kind of dries within 48, 24 hours, and then you can paint it with acrylic paint. And once it's kind of fully dry, and you'll be able to tell as well when it's dry, it kind of goes, it goes fully kind of dry and hard, and yeah, it's pretty obvious when it's dry. So it's not too hard to figure that out as well, which is quite good. So you don't kind of have to guess. But yeah, and then you can paint it with acrylic paint, decorate however you want. A way that I find quite good to make it shiny as well, if you still want that kind of glossy finish that you get with fired pieces, is you can either spray it with hairspray, or you can buy gloss varnishes as well from craft shops. They tend to be the same sort of brand, the Das brand, and they do a varnish. Mod Podge also kind of works, PVA glue. Yeah, it's quite a few things that work if you want to kind of get that glossy thing, or you can just paint the whole thing and then it's shiny because it's acrylic paint. Yeah, I also just realised that you can see all of the mess in my office. So yeah, I should have tidied before this, but please ignore the mess. It's all just the creative process. But yeah, so we're gonna start by, if you rip your packet open, you might need some scissors, because the Das, if you're using Das as well, because the packets are quite tough to rip open. So if you get some scissors as well, and open that, and feel free to pause this as well whenever you want, because also it's not live stream, so you can pause it, come back to it, make a cup of tea if you want to, which is the nice thing about it being pre-recorded. But yeah, so then once you've opened it, if you rip off a chunk of clay, I'd say about, let's see, about the size of a big orange, which is quite vague, but about the size of a big orange, kind of like a big handful kind of size. And then what you're gonna do is just roll it out. So just roll it into a ball. You can either do it on the table, or you can do it in, ooh, I almost dropped it on the floor then, or you can do it in your hands. So either works, kind of just personal preference of which you prefer, whether you, I don't know if you can hear that, but that is the cat screaming upstairs. I knew she was going to be a menace in this. But yeah, so you can just roll it out like this, or you can roll it in your hands. Some people hate the texture of clay in their hands, especially when it gets a bit wet. It can be a bit kind of like a bit of sensory hell, or people love it. So it's purely just preference. There's no right or wrong way to do this, really. And that's also what I really like about clay as well, is that there isn't a right or wrong way to do it. You can just kind of, yeah, do it whichever way feels best. Yeah, so there might be some little cracks in it, but you can just kind of smooth them out, and it doesn't really matter too much because we're going to roll it out anyway. Yeah, so then once that's kind of in like a bit of a ball shape, put that on the work surface there. I'm just going to move some of my things out of the way and make sure you can still see what I'm doing. So we're just going to put that on there on the work surface, and then get your rolling pin. Mine's quite small, so I'm going to have to kind of do mine in like some chunks to kind of make sure that I don't get the edges kind of indenting it. But if you've got a big rolling pin as well, that's also great. So yeah, then we're just going to roll it out. It can be quite tough at first, especially with air dry clay, to kind of start rolling out. So if you just kind of, literally like you're making cookies, just roll it out. It's literally the same, you just can't eat it. But yeah, so we're just going to roll that out. Sorry if the camera's shaking whilst I'm doing this. I didn't think about that when I was setting it up, that it's going to make the table vibrate. But yeah, so we're just going to roll that out. You might also find that little bits tear off as well if it's quite wet, but that's kind of fine. It's pretty fixable. So yeah, we're just going to roll that out. I've also got another rolling pin I might use as well. Yeah, so just roll that out. And what you kind of thickness-wise, what you want it as is, it's hard to describe, but about, it's so hard to describe when it's not in person, about that thickness, which is about, I'd say like the length of a nail, roughly, just as like a little bit less than a nail. But you can kind of tell when it feels thick enough, but not too thin, because basically what you don't want is you don't want it to go too thin and then it's kind of wobbly, because then it can kind of warp, and you want it to be, because we're making a wall hanging, you want it to be flat so it actually sits against the wall. That's the main thing. So you don't want it to be too thin, and if anything, thicker is a bit better because it just means it's more sturdy. But yeah, so about that. So if I put my finger next to that, you can kind of see it's about the width. It's about, what's depth of the width of my finger. That is confusing, but it's about the same as my finger in terms of how thick the clay is. Yeah, so then what we're going to do is you've got that nice and flat, and then you want to take, I've forgotten to get one of my resources. What you should also have that was in the list is a knife as well, just a butter knife. So I've got a butter knife here, and I've also got this little tool that I use for slicing my clay. So you can use either of them, and just to kind of demonstrate with the knife, you just kind of wet it a little bit with water just on the end, not loads, just a little bit. And then what we're going to do is cut out kind of like a semicircle with a straight edge. So if we look at the back of this, it's that kind of shape that we're cutting out. So that kind of curved like archway. I don't know why I said a semicircle, that's not really a semicircle, is it? It's just kind of curved. But yeah, like a doorway kind of shape. So we're just going to cut that out, and about that sort of size. So I've got this one to base it off, which I'm just going to go round. And what you do is you just do a straight line and curve it slightly and then back down. So it doesn't really matter if it's not super like straight or super kind of neat. What helps with the water, when you use a little bit of water on the knife, is that it just goes through the clay a little bit smoother, which makes it a bit easier to kind of slice through. So then we're going to take that away. Also forgot to say, if you've still got your bag of clay open, if you just fold over the end just so it doesn't dry out, which you don't want it to, because it's air dry clay, you don't want it to kind of dry out whilst you're making this as well, because you don't want it to go to waste. So yeah, so then we've got this, which is about the size, for perspective, it's about the size of my hand, roughly. So just kind of as a guide, that's roughly how big you should make it. So I'm going to put mine onto my little board here, but if you've not got a board, it's also completely fine, you can just do it straight onto the table. So then what we're going to do is wet your finger a little bit in your water, and then just smooth the edges round, just like this. And what that does is it just makes it less sharp. So you know how I said with my bowl, this edge is really sharp on my bowl, and that's because I didn't smooth it. So you want to make sure it's smoothed so that it's nice and neat. And then you can also run your finger like flat along the edges, so that way it kind of keeps like a nice flat edge, and those curved bits are nice and smooth, And just kind of do that until it feels about right, really. There's no kind of specific amount that you need to do it, or yeah, it's not really specific. And that is what I like about clay, is that it's not specific. I mean, you can just pretty much do anything to it and it's good. And also, if you make any mistakes as well, you can just smooth them out, which is the other thing that I really like about it. But yeah, so we've got that ready there, and that's the base of it as well. So that's going to be the back, kind of the back piece of it. What is quite good to do as well with these pieces is to not then lift them up. So if you haven't got a board, if you've just got the table, if you can, try and do it slightly, try and do this next bit next to it rather than kind of picking it up and moving it. If you do have to pick it up and move it, that's also fine, just kind of flatten it back down. But the thing with the clay as well is that sometimes when it then dries, it can kind of warp a little bit, but it'll generally be fine. So if you've not got enough space, that's also fine. But if you do have the space, then I always suggest to kind of, yeah, make the next thing next to it. Yeah, so what we're gonna do is get another bit of clay. So if you rip another chunk out, about the same size again, or like a small orange this time, but it doesn't matter if you get a big orange, it's also fine. We just have extra left over then. So yeah, so you get another chunk, do the same thing again, just roll it into a ball. Again, in your hand or on the table, just kind of roll it around. And we're basically just going to do exactly the same thing again, but to make the shelf part. So it'll just be a little bit smaller, and then you can kind of line it up with it to make sure it's the right size. So yeah, so we want to roll that out again as well, roughly to about the same thickness. It doesn't matter too much if it's not the identical thickness, that's fine. It doesn't have to be super kind of specific or accurate. If you're doing something that is with ceramic clay, so like this, then like the stuff that I'm using, then it's kind of helpful to make it a similar thickness, just so that when it goes in the kiln, it then it's not super thick, so that it doesn't kind of crack or anything like that. But because it's air dry, it doesn't really matter too much about the thickness. It just, if it's super thick, it might just take a bit longer to dry. That's fine. Yeah, so just gonna roll that out. About the same thickness, again about the width of a finger. That was about right. And if you're not quite sure, you can compare it to your other piece. So as you can see, this is kind of the same, which is perfect. So we keep it like that. And then what you want to do is get your knife again, or whatever it is that you're using, like sharp tool or anything like that. And then what you want to do is you can either do it by eye, and I've done a lot of these now, so I can kind of do it by eye. But if you're not sure, what you can also do is kind of, if you line your piece up, you can kind of gauge about the same sort of width. And I always say as well to make it a little bit bigger than you think you need it, because you can always trim bits off. It's a lot easier to trim bits off than it is to add bits on. So what we're going to do is do another kind of semicircle. No, they're not semicircle. Why do I keep saying the semicircles? Another like archway shape, and just make it a bit shorter. So like this one, we made it nice and long with a curved top. This one, we're just going to do this part here. So it's kind of like a half version. So then that will work out as being this little shelf, or the base shelf. Yeah. So wet your knife a little bit, and then just do a nice little semicircle. Again, just make it a little bit bigger than you think you will, because you can chop bits off. Oops. Just cut it a little bit more. Yes, and you rip the rest of your clay off, like you're making cookies. And then you can see if it lines up. So you can see with mine's a little bit bigger than the actual thing. So what we're going to do then is you can kind of lay it next to it like that, and then just trim it. Wet your knife a little bit again and trim it, so then it's the same width. And that just makes it a little bit neater, and it makes it easier for when we're going to attach it as well. And you can also decide how deep you want the shelf to be. If you want it to be like quite shallow or you want it to be slightly deeper, that's also fine. So you can kind of just play around with that a little bit. See what shape you want. It also doesn't have to be round. You can make it a straight edge as well. Like whatever you want to do is completely fine. This is where the creative freedom part comes in. And any scraps as well that you have of the clay that you've cut off, if you just kind of push them back into a ball, it basically just means they have less surface area, so then they can't dry as fast. So it just preserves them a little bit as well. So that's kind of handy. Right, so what we're going to do with this is if you get it in your hand like that, we just do the same thing again, just wetting it, smoothing the edges, nice and easy. If you get 2 fingers like that, and just lightly, not pressing, but just kind of run your fingers over the edge of it, then that also does both edges in one. But also if you just want to take your time and do one at a time, that's also fine. There's no rush. I don't know what the weather's like on the day that this is going out, but right now it's absolutely pouring it down with rain. I'm looking out the window right now and it is horrible weather. So this is really cozy and relaxing. Just making some nice little clay. I don't know if it's like a heat wave at the moment when you're watching this, as it's a couple of weeks away, but hopefully it is. I hope you all have lovely weather because it's currently raining. So yeah, it's not much different from what I'm used to being in Manchester, but it's always nice to have a bit of sunshine in, you know, June, July. So it's always a treat. But yeah, so now that that's ready, if you just want to, if there's any like extra bits on the first piece that have kind of not super smooth, that you kind of, where you've knocked it, or when you're lining up, if you've like actually made some little dips on it or anything, you can just kind of smooth them out again. It's completely fine. Get the edges nice and smooth. Cool. So then, this is the technical part. So I thought that was the cat doing something again. We've got a tortoise. The tortoise is roaming around downstairs at the moment. So he gets let out of his cage. He's in a big enclosure. Makes it sound like he's in a tiny box. So he might just wander past. I think he's in the hallway at the moment because I can hear his little feet on the floor. So it's like a zoo in our house. So you just see them all wandering past. But yeah, nice and smooth. And what you're going to do next is get your knife again, or whatever sharp tool you're using. And this is when we start cross hatching. So this is how you attach things with clay or ceramic clay. It's exactly the same process. So you just see if it'll kind of focus without covering my phone in clay. It's all over my hands. So you just want to do this little cross hatching motion, and it just adds all these little indents into the clay. And what that does is it just helps it stick when you then attach 2 parts together. So we just want to do that. So it's nice and kind of like rough and kind of jaggedy. So do that on there, on that edge. And then now's when you decide basically which bit you want to attach it to. So whether you want a halfway shelf or if you want a bottom shelf. I think I'm going to do a bottom shelf just because that one's a middle shelf, so then you can kind of see what both of them look like. But then, oh, the sun's come out. Maybe I manifested it because I was talking about the sunshine. But yeah, so we're just gonna do the same thing on the bottom. So right where you want to attach it, you just, again, do your little cross hatching motion, and it just makes it a bit jaggedy to help it kind of have some grip. Because we've smoothed it so much, the thing with clay is that you then want it to actually be able to have something to grip to, because otherwise it'll just kind of, it's just 2 like really flat surfaces stuck together then. Right, so then once that's kind of jaggedy enough, kind of like that, if you can see that, then what you want to do is wet your finger again, not loads, but a little bit on the end, and then just lightly tap the water onto here so that it's kind of like a little bit wet, but not soaking, because if it's soaking it'll kind of slip around and it makes it a little bit harder to do it. So then do the same thing on this one. You might find it smooths it a little bit, but as long as it's still quite jaggedy, you're okay. So then once it's got enough water on it, what we're going to do is then just attach them like that. So then you just press it on, you'll see the water kind of bubbling either side of it. And then you take an extra little bit of clay from the previous lump that was discarded, add a little bit of water to that. If there's any gaps, you can add it onto this. You don't need to do this if there's no gaps, but I always like to do this just for a little bit of extra reinforcement. And then what you do is you just smooth it on, really. So I've put a little bit too much water on this. So what I'm going to do is get my dry sponge and just take a little bit of the water off. Taking a little bit too much off there. So now we're just going to smooth that out. You can also use the end of your knife to just smooth it like that. And it just blends it. And what that does is it just, well, actually just that, it just blends it really. It just smooths the two joins together so that then it doesn't feel like it's a joint. And then you can re-smooth it with your finger so that it's nice and smooth. So you haven't got those kind of knife markings on it, which you don't really want. But yeah. And then you can go in like a downwards motion as well on this side. So you can kind of join it like this. And also, if you want to take your time with this, go slower, that's also fine. Feel free to pause the video, do what you need to do. There's absolutely no rush. You can take as much time as you want. What I also find helpful as well is to do another little chunk of clay, like I did on the back, but just down the middle. So you take another little bit, make it into a little tiny sausage in your hands, wet that as well a little bit. And then I just lay that in a little gap like that and smooth it in. So that again is just a little bit of reinforcement or reassurance, whichever one you feel like fits it. And then you can use your knife again, or lollipop stick. Lollipop stick tends to be a bit better for this one, just because it's not quite as sharp, but knife also works just as well. Just have to be a bit more gentle with it so you don't accidentally slice it. It's the only thing. So then you can just kind of see where, just have a look, see where yours needs smoothing. Don't push it too much so you don't kind of make a dent in the bottom. But yeah, it's pretty simple once you've kind of got the main motion of it. Like once you kind of know how much pressure to put on it and things like that, it kind of starts to come together. And with it being air dry clay as well, it doesn't matter too much if it isn't super duper smooth, because with fired stuff, so if it goes in the kiln, with like ceramic clay, is you want the joints to be super smooth and really secure so that it doesn't break when it's fired, because sometimes if you haven't joined things fully when it goes in the kiln, where it heats, because it heats up to like 1,200 degrees, it's really, really hot, or like 1,000 degrees, varies, but it heats really, really hot. And then what can happen is if you've stuck two pieces together like that, and there's like a slight gap in them, the hot air gets in and it just blows them apart. And that's when you then get things that break, or people always kind of say it explodes, which I think exploding is a bit dramatic, but I have had things that have exploded. So it doesn't matter too much with air dry, but it's always good to kind of still smooth them out just in case. You also don't want to kind of, risk it then breaking. It just makes it more secure, really. Okay, so just smooth that out. Around there so you can see it. I have a tendency to lift things up while I'm making them, but I need it to be in the other camera. So just keep that nice and smooth. And you can see as well that that's quite straight. And you might find that it kind of curves or wobbles or anything like that, but just kind of keep an eye on it as it's drying. Because sometimes, because it's heavy, it might tend to kind of flop a little bit, but it's all right. It doesn't matter too much. But yeah, you just don't want it to flop downwards, because otherwise, if it's flopping down like that way, then nothing will sit on the shelf. But if it flops the other way, it doesn't matter too much. But yeah, so that's nice and smooth. So once you've done that, if you haven't finished, feel free to pause the video, it's also completely fine. But yeah, and then we're gonna take our paintbrush. We're not actually using the paintbrush part of it. You can also, actually, if you want to, if you don't like the feeling of clay on your fingers, it's a bit late now, I should have told you this at the start, but you can use a paintbrush to smooth it. It's just, I don't personally enjoy doing that technique just because I find it just takes quite a while and it makes it quite wet. So like that makes that edge quite wet. But if you've got like small little bits that need smoothing, you can also use a paintbrush. Like if it's like a really delicate bit or you've not got really tiny fingers to kind of get into certain bits, then you can also use the paintbrush and just kind of smooth it down. But yeah, so what we're going to do with the paintbrush, since we're not actually using the paintbrush part, you want to wet that again like you did with the knife, just so it's kind of like smooth and I guess lubricated in a way with water. And then what you want to do, just wet that a little bit and take about just a couple of centimeters from the top there and poke your paintbrush through. And then we're going to do like a little kind of circular motion, so like really small, and it'll slowly get bigger. And what that does is it just makes the little hole for the nail. I tend to make mine quite big, just so you've definitely got a big enough gap in it, because you don't want to finish, it dries, and then you realise that, oh, actually the nail won't fit through the hole. So I always think it's a bit better to do it bigger than you think it's going to. And also with ceramic clay as well, when it goes in the kiln, it also shrinks as well, so it loses some of its size. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's the water, I don't really know, but I just know that it does. So when you put things in the kiln, it kind of shrinks a little bit, and the same when you then put it on the glaze firing, it shrinks again. Not loads, but say like this one, for example, this would have been about that size. So like, I'll show you in this other camera. So it would have been about that size before and kind of up to there. And it shrunk kind of by about that much, by like a couple of centimeters or a centimeter. It's not loads, but enough that you always, with ceramic clay, you want to kind of make things a little bit bigger than it is. But air dry clay doesn't shrink, which is also the handy thing. You don't have to think about that. But yeah, so you just kind of make the hole whatever size you want it to be and try and get it in the middle of this piece as well, so that you can make sure that it hangs straight, because you don't want it to be hanging wobbly. I've not quite done mine in the centre, as you can see, but that's fine. It doesn't really matter too much. It's just how much of a perfectionist you want to be with it, really. But yeah, I always think it's nice when with doing air dry clay workshops, I always think it's quite nice as well to like learn a little bit about ceramics at the same time, because ceramic workshops can be quite inaccessible in some ways, in that they tend to be more expensive because it is more of a pricier kind of process, and also it tends to be pricier and not quite as accessible to kind of maybe access, like in terms of where they are and things like that. Like the tools needed and things, even though you can use tools like this, but sometimes people are a little bit more daunted by ceramic ones, and just kind of as a practice as a whole, it can be quite daunting. So I always think it's quite nice just to like throw in little bits about about the process of making ceramics as well. So you just kind of, if you want to go and do a ceramics workshop, you already kind of know a little bit about it, so you can kind of seem like a pro when you go in, which I always think is quite nice. Yeah, so that's the basis of the wall hanging, really. That's what it looks like. It's about the size of it. And yeah, what we're going to do now is the incense holder. So if you just get a little ball, kind of like a pea sized, and then just roll it into a little ball, and then there's two methods. I'm going to show you both of them. So we can then roll it into a little sausage, which is quite thin sausage. Just kind of roll it out. If your clay feels quite dry, you can just like dab a little bit of water on it as well and add it to that whilst you roll it, and then it'll kind of hydrate it again. You just don't want it to have cracks in it, really, because it just makes it a bit harder to use. So then what you can do is you can make it into a little sausage shape like that, and make it into a little donut. See, mine's cracked a little bit because it's quite dry. If it does that, you can just kind of smooth it back into shape. So now that's like a little donut shape. And then you can put it there and then we can smooth it out. Or, that's one method. The method I prefer doing, I always like to show people both just in case, because some people find the other method, but that first method easier, but it really just depends on the person. So yeah, what we're going to do is take another little pea-sized circle. That's kind of starting to flop, so I'm going to prop that back up. I'll turn it around this way as well so you can see. We're going to get this little pea-sized one, and what we're going to do is get your knife and about in the middle, closer to the edge, so not fully in the middle, but halfway in terms of the width of the piece, but about here, just make a few little indentations, just so it kind of, again, is a little bit not super duper smooth. Doesn't have to be quite as cross-hatched as last time when you were joining the two pieces, but then what we're going to do, just make that a little bit wet, and then just press the blob in. So it's just like a little circle in it like that, and then we're just going to smooth it out. You can use your fingers, or if you've got a lollipop stick, I'm going to use my little tool that I showed you before, these little ones. But you can also use your knife or lollipop stick, or even the edge of the paintbrush really. Actually, I'll show you with the paintbrush. So you can just smooth it out like that. And keep it as a little mound, so it's not completely flat. But you just do that, and then gently smooth it with water, just so it's like a little kind of little mounded lump, really. Just a lovely way to describe it, mounded lump. That's what you want. And then you get the end of the paintbrush again, and gently, right in the middle of the mounded lump, just press in, nice and straight. Oh, I messed that one up. But this is the good thing about clay, you can just smooth it back out if you make a mistake like that. So then, I tend to just do a little, kind of rotate the paintbrush in a circle, like that, or kind of gently do little circle motions, but either works. And then pull it out. And what you've got then is a little hole, and that's where the incense will sit. So you can also, if it doesn't quite feel deep enough, so if it doesn't feel secure enough, you can go a little bit deeper, but just make sure you don't go through the edge, because what you don't want is just a hole straight through your wall hanging either. But yeah, so we just want that, just so it can hold the incense, so it's got something to lean on. And you can lightly smooth around it as well, just so that it's any extra bits that you've kind of made little indents in or anything like that. And if you need to smooth up any of this as well, go for it. But yeah, so then that is where you have the incense. Just like that. And that is literally, that is the incense holder. That is the wall hanging. You can add things to it. As you can see, that's kind of starting to flop. So if you just keep pressing it, or if you've got an extra sponge or like a mug or anything like that, you can just kind of prop it up, and it just gives it a bit of something to lean against really, so it doesn't flop, which I always find quite helpful. Or if you've got newspaper, the only thing with newspaper is it can kind of leave scratchy marks on the base, but you can use that just to kind of prop it up, just to give it a bit of structure really. Yeah, so we've got that there, and you can either leave it like that and wait for it to dry in 24 to 48 hours and then paint it and decorate it however you want, or you can add some little clay kind of embellishments and things like that to it. So I'm just going to show you how you would do them if you wanted to. So there's no pressure to, you can leave it like that. You can leave the workshop here, you can watch the rest of it, it's up to you really. But if you want to add anything to it, this is how I tend to do it. So if you get another little chunk of clay from your ball that you've got left over, or you pack it, whatever, and then you can just roll it out and squish it in your fingers. Make it a little bit smoother, not smoother, make it a little bit thinner than what you made the base. As you can see, mine's kind of starting to crack a little bit, so I need more water. So if it starts to crack and it looks a little bit like a desert, that where like the sand kind of has loads of cracks on it, just get some water and smooth it out, and that just rehydrates it. Let's keep it nice and thin, not super duper thin, but as you can see, kind of thinner than that base. And what we're going to do is, I've got a little star stamp, but you can also cut out any shape you want really. So like I've got on this spoon, it's one I made earlier, like in Blue Peter. I made this spoon like a couple of years ago, I think, but I still got it knocking around. I added a little star shape that I've then stuck onto it, which is a nice little detail, things like that. And like this part, these are all stuck on in the same way, so that it's like a little cloud, there's little pumpkins and birds, picnic basket, and they were all stuck on in that same way that I'm going to show you now. And it's also the same way you actually added the two kind of sides together. So it's nice and simple and not super new either, so you kind of already know how to do it if you got to this far. So I'm just going to lay that down, get a little bit of water on your paintbrush, or actually no, not your paintbrush, your knife, wrong utensil, get a little bit of water, and I'm just going to do a little heart shape. You can also, if you don't want to freehand it, because that can be a recipe for disaster if you freehand things sometimes. I know I make certain things sometimes, I'm like, what shape even is that? I don't even know what I was trying to make. You can also get some paper, draw it out, and then trace around it with the knife if you're unsure of how to do it. So we kind of don't want to go too hard the first time and just cutting it out. But yeah, so then that's your little heart. You get another bit of water and smooth that out like that. You just want to make sure that it's nice and smooth, same way that you did with that one. And we just smooth it out like this. Again, little crevice, make sure that's nice and smooth. You can lay it in your hand as well to smooth it, or if there's anything else you want as well, you can do anything you want in this stage really. This is just more about kind of showing you how to stick it on. So then what we're going to do is do the same cross-hatching method. So we'll just take the knife and slice it across it, just to kind of, again, add some kind of friction, some kind of thing for it to grip onto really. And then you're going to choose whereabouts you want it on here. I'm going to go for the middle at the back, so I'm just going to do the same cross hatching, not across the whole thing, but roughly about where you think the size of the thing will be. So it doesn't matter if it overlaps it or if it's slightly under, but pretty much the whole thing, and then we're just going to wet it same way that we did with the other part. Just gently add some water and then stick it down. Then we just smooth it out like that. Don't press too hard because you don't want it to kind of flatten or go out of shape, but hard enough that you can feel it kind of starting to stick. So we're just going to smooth that out as we stick it down. And then if you've got any extra bits where, like you can see with mine, that it's kind of where I've cross-hatched underneath, it's kind of sticking out a bit, you can get the end of your paintbrush, or if you have any other tools, just wet that slightly and just smooth that out like that. There we go, just smooth that out. Nice. And that's just a case, this part's just a case of like how smooth you want it really. There we go. So that's a little heart added on. I quite like my heart's a little bit wonky as well, which is quite cute. Yeah, so that's what it looks like. Oh, that sponge has already kind of helped straighten that up as well, so it is quite handy to have something kind of for it to lean on. But yeah, so that's what it looks like. And then if you have anything like little letter stamps, you can buy them in shops. I haven't got any in here, but you can get them in like little stamp set kits. You can get them from like Hobbycraft and the Works and things like that. just for like £1 or £2, and they're like the little letter rubber stamps. If you want to like stamp any text in or anything like that. I have some of these ones that I use for my ceramics, which is just a different font type. They're quite fiddly to use. So the big rubber stamps, like the wooden rubber ones, are a little bit easier to use. But you can kind of then just stamp it into it. And yeah, add any details that you want really. You can add things kind of hanging off if you wanted to like do the same method of cross hatching and sticking it onto it. Anything you want really. I'm going to do some little stamping whilst you kind of maybe finish off what you're doing, or feel free to skip if you're already done. I'm just going to do some little stamping in. The only thing with stamping is that it is very hard to find the right letters, which is the part that I always takes me the longest. And I'm also not the best at spelling, so it's always a bit interesting when I stamp things. I have to double check and triple check. Yeah, I also need to get a box that has enough compartments for the alphabet, because I currently don't. And that poses quite a problem when I'm trying to find all of the letters. But yeah, so I'm just going to stamp in the phrase queer joy into mine. Just need a J, that's the last one. And then you can kind of see what it looks like with things kind of stamped in, and kind of show you how far to kind of stamp them in, because sometimes it can be a little bit hard to kind of find. It's proving hard to find the letter J, but it can be hard to kind of tell how deep you're kind of meant to press the, there it is, how deep you're meant to kind of press the stamp without kind of going too far as well. I always think as well with stamping, it's good to get a dry sponge and just kind of lightly dab where you're gonna stamp it in, just because if it's a bit too wet, when you then pull the stamp out, it kind of takes some of the clay with it, because it's kind of really suctioned to it. So it's helpful if it's kind of not dry, because then it's hard to stamp it in, but not wet either. So what we're going to do is, if you want to do this, or if you just want to do something else, or just watch, it's also fine. So I'm just going to press in lightly, just so you can feel it. So this is a little bit wet actually, so you can see that it's pulled it a little bit. I don't know if it's going to focus on it, but it's pulled out slightly. If it does that, you can just go in again. There we go. Or you can stamp with your sponge as well, just dab it slightly. There we go, that's a little bit better. So as you can see, it's kind of making a slight dent, but it's not really far in, so it doesn't have the whole thing go in. It's about just under half of the stamp. But if you're using the little block stamps, they're a lot easier to use, because you do just press the whole thing in, which makes it a lot easier. These are just very fiddly. So I'm just going to stamp these ones in, make sure I'm spelling everything right. I think adding text to stuff is quite nice, and if you're going to paint it afterwards as well with acrylic, that can be another way to add text, or add little messages, or if you don't want to add anything on like 3D wise, you can kind of paint those things on as well, which is really nice. Yeah, that looks like that. So there we go. I'm just going to smooth that back, because I knocked that before. Where I touched with the sponge as well, I'm just going to smooth that out. Yeah, lovely. And that is your little incense holder. And then once it's dry, you can then just kind of take it off the work surface. I tend to find like a sharp tool, kind of like a knife, or like a quite sharp knife, or a butter knife, and then you just kind of carefully go around the edges like that, and then it comes off like that. But I always find it's best to do that when it's dry, not when it's fully dry, but if you just keep an eye on it, just to kind of see how it's going with its drying, and just kind of you'll be able to see when it feels like it's, there we go. See, it moves slightly then. I would wait a little bit just because you don't want to risk warping it like I'm about to. But then once it's ready like that, you kind of just dab around these sides as well on that base edge, just to smooth that edge out as well, like you did with the top edge. Just makes it less sharp, like my sharp bowl. And then you can lay it back down, and then it will not be quite as stuck, and then it will dry and you can get it off nice and easily afterwards. Yeah. And then oh, there we go. Almost ruined all my hard work. Dear. There we go. That was a close one. There we go. It's because I'd forgotten that I just sliced it off. Normally it's stuck when I lift it up like that, but yeah. Whoops. There we go. I'm gonna hold it like that. So yeah, that is the finished incense holder, and you can see the little incense will sit in there. I'm gonna put this down before I break it. And that is a prime example of don't do that part of it. Don't lift it up, because you'll drop it. If you're anything like me, you will drop it. But yeah, so that is the finished piece, which you can see from this angle on the other one, so I don't have to lift it up. But yeah, and then for cleanup, all you have to do is just kind of get a cloth, like kind of one of these cottony cloths, and just get some water. You can use the water from your little dish if it's not too, your little bowl if it's not too kind of clay, or get some fresh water. You just wipe it clean. I tend to do kind of like one wet wipe through, and then kind of rinse out the cloth, get some fresh water, do it again, and then rinse it out and do it with a dry one. Just because the first time that you do it, it'll probably just kind of smear some of the clay around as well. So it's good to kind of go in a couple of times just to properly clear it all. But yeah, and then if you've got any clay left, if it's back in the packet, you can put it back in the packet, and then I always wrap a little bit of cling film over the edge of the packet, or put it in like a Tupperware box and things like that, like an airtight container, and that just prevents any air getting to it, so you can kind of go back to it at any point and use the clay again. Yeah, and then if you want to paint it, again, like I said earlier, 24 to 48 hours, and then it'll be good to paint. But yeah, so that is the whole workshop. And thank you so much for coming. I hope that you have learned something, that you had a good time, and yeah, I would love to see your pictures of anything that you've made, and yeah, see what you've made. Feel free to share any on Instagram and tag me, and sorry, I just completely forgot what I was talking about. There was a car went past, I forgot what I was talking about. But yeah, feel free to tag me as well in anything that you post. I would love to reshare it because I want to see what everyone's made. But yeah, so yeah, thank you so much for coming, and I hope you have a lovely Pride Month as well. And yeah, enjoy Pride, enjoy Pride season, Pride Month, and everything. But yeah, thank you so much, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.